let's get rolling. We're about 5 minutes late already, and I know Rob's got a lot to talk about today. I hope everybody had a chance to see the movie yesterday. I had never seen that movie. He was right. I was furious through. And I'm going to stop right there because I could talk for probably 3 hours about what all that movie did to my brain last night. I couldn't go to sleep. But what it has done for me, it has set a path for a lot of things that I want to explore. If you were like me, as I was watching the movie, I should know all of the lineage of the people and where they're coming from and all of that, but I didn't. And I don't know about you, but I kept finding myself kind of looking at my Bible about some of these people. So I brought, you can't see this chart, okay? You can't see this, but afterwards, if you want to come up and just take a snapshot, what this does shows you the lineage, all the way starting with Adam and Eve down through, here's the flood and all of the people. I had this rolled up in my closet. I thought, man, I'm getting that baby out. And it really helped me kind of visualize all of this together. Okay, so Rob's going to teach this Sunday and next Sunday. And then November the 4th, I'm going to pick back up. I'm sorry, but he can't teach every Sunday, so I'm going to have to fill in for a little while. So I'm going to start with November the 4th. I've got this thing rolling around in my head. I'm not really sure what to call it, so we're going to just come up with it right now, okay? And it's going to be, what do you say about me?
What do you say, what?
What do you say about me? Okay? So just think about the Jesus-Peter moment and all of that. And when Jesus is asking them and he says, what are the people saying? And then he says, what do you say? So that I'm just going to throw that out there to kind of get your interest perked up. And we're going to go about this a lot different way maybe than what you would normally think of.
You're not going to make us watch some stupid movie.
No.
Brutal.
But if anybody comes up with one, no flannel graphs, no movies. We'll see where we can go from here. All right. So let me say a prayer, and then we'll kick off. Father, thank you again for another beautiful day. Thank you for this time together. Father, be with Rod this morning as we continue to talk about the flood. In Jesus' name, amen. Did anybody see my wife come in? I guess I'm on now. Okay.
You can sit wherever you want.
I said, well.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, so I do hope y'all got to watch the Noah film. I'm just curious, who got angry watching it?
It was interesting.
Okay, angry. Okay, we'll talk about that. The first time I saw it when it first came out, I remember we went to the theater because Noah film. I was kind of angry. Like, what have they done to this story? But I'll tell you, I've lost count. I've probably watched the film, I don't know, 10, 20 times. I've watched it a lot. And I remember watching it again a couple years ago. I had not seen it forever, but it was after I had done a lot more study of rabbinic literature and a lot more study of things. And I watched it again. I was like, he did what? Oh my gosh. There's some really subtle things that he does in that film that are just beautiful in how he interprets the flood. We'll talk about that. I want to talk about a couple of things first. So we've been looking at the flood story, and we've been looking at it through a lot of different lenses to see what it is we can learn from the flood that we maybe don't think about a lot. And so we started with our baseline, which is our children's stories. And then we looked at how we read the text and try to ask questions of it, engage with it to see what is the white space? What are the things it doesn't say? And then how are we filling those things in? Last week we looked at some of the ancient Near Eastern flood stories and how they deal with this same topic. Today we're going to look at film. And next week we're going to look at, I'm actually debating for next week. I'm going to have you do two things. One maybe to look at what's called source criticism, and look at how perhaps some of the discrepancies we see in the text are because that there are two flood traditions that have been merged together. But I'm kind of leaning towards what may be more interesting is to look at how Noah really is a second Adam. And what do we see in terms of parallels between the creation story and the flood? And what can we learn from that? And we'll do some wrap up, try to pull all this together to see what it is that we learn from this. So today we're looking at the flood in film. And this is fun for me because this is really my PhD research area, is how does film act as what we call reception history? How is it that film reflects how we interpret the biblical story? And the area that I think is even more interesting is how can film help us better engage with the biblical text to learn from it in ways that just purely reading the text doesn't. And so film is really what's part of an area of study called visual hermeneutics. Visual hermeneutics includes how do things like artwork, song, poetry, music, paintings, performance art, how do all of those things function as interpretation of the text? And by the way, it's been happening for not quite 2,000 years, but a pretty long time. And one of the things that it does that I find really fun is that it really exposes the white space in the text. It exposes where we have to make interpretive choices, how we have to fill in the blanks, because the text doesn't give us a lot of detail. Okay, and we, whether we know it or not, we fill it in, and how we fill it in influences oftentimes how we interpret the story. And we'll see some of that today. The other thing I really like about it is that because film engages multiple senses, it makes the viewer an active participant in the story. And film is particularly good at that because what film does, and it's very subtle how it does this to the point that we don't even realize it. Film sutures us into the story. In other words, it inserts us into the text. And one way it does that is very subtle. It has to do with camera angles. How does the camera depict where the viewer is in relation to the action that's happening? And more often than not, it's right there, right in the perspective. And you can see that with what are called over-the-shoulder shots, between dialogue, right? It shifts from one side to another. There's all sorts of technique that film does. Film is effective because the viewer is sutured, stitched into the text, into the film text. And it enables you to identify with the characters and identify with the story, and it allows it to evoke certain emotions. So that's why I think film is kind of a fun thing to look at, especially when it comes to Bible stories. And so I want to just do a quick look at the first time the Bible story gets made into film, which is in 1929. A film called, the first time the flood gets made into a film, not the first time the Bible gets made into a film. It's Noah's Ark, released in 1928, directed by a guy named Michael Curtiz, who is a Hungarian that worked in Austria and then came to the U.S. For its day, it had a massive budget of $1 million to make the film. And it tells the story of Noah as a parallel to the events leading to World War I. And in fact, the story is bookended by scenes. There's like parallel stories with the same characters, kind of a Wizard of Oz sort of a thing where, you know, the characters that are taking place just before World War I and World War I is declared, end up being the same characters in the biblical Noah story. New York Times at the time when it came out, New York Times reviewer said that Noah's Ark was probably the worst film ever made, which is actually fairly common for most Bible films. The critics pan them as being just really bad films. But they tell us a lot about how we view the story. So what I want to do is, and the other thing it does that's kind of cool, is it looks at the flood as being, divine retribution for man's evil. And the parallels it makes is that the allies are the righteous ones, the Axis powers are the wicked humanity, and the Russians are the Nephilim, okay? Are they good? Are they bad? They're right in the middle, right? So anyway, it's kind of fun in that regard. So what I want to show you, just real quick, is the movie trailer for this film.
Noah's Ark. And behold, even I, do bring a flood of water upon the earth, to destroy all flesh. Noah's Ark, 3 years in the making, with a mighty cast of 10,000. One of the most costly films in Hollywood's history. See the worship of the golden calf. See the rise of the Tower of Babel. See the ritual of human sacrifice. See the construction of the great ark. See the flight of the pagans. See the flood that destroyed the world. Noah's Ark, written by Darrell F. Zanuck and directed by Michael Curtiz, envisions the most overpowering scenes ever filmed. Noah's Ark, a motion picture you'll always remember. Noah's Ark, the greatest spectacle of them all. Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark.
What do you notice is different about what they include in this story?
The later kingdoms, Babylonians and stuff.
Oh, it's got Babylon, the Tower of Babel in it. It's got golden calf. Yeah. So I want to show you, this is another scene from the film. This is the flood itself. Okay, what do you notice about that flood scene that's different from the Bible story?
Bombarding the ark.
Say that again?
Bombarding the ark. They're
Bum-
just like, yeah, they're just like, let me in, let me in.
People, okay. Okay. What else do you see?
Well, in the recent one, didn't Tubal Cain get on the ark?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute.
He
Yeah.
didn't get on it here.
Yeah. Interesting. That guy that they're showing there, in the beginning of the film, he plays a Russian, and he's also the king of the Nephilim. Okay, trying to get on the ark.
Well, you see the emotion of Noah and his wife that, they felt scared and probably felt very sorry for the people that were not going to live.
What does Noah say in the biblical story? What does Noah say? Not one word.
Oh, that's why I don't know.
There's not a single line of dialogue for Noah until
It's a one dimension.
after the flood, right? He just seems to blindly go along with building this ark. And yet what this does is it imagines what's going on behind the text, which is, what about all the people? And what effect would it have on Noah and his family being on the ark as this is happening, knowing what's happening outside?
I also thought this was interesting, and it made them look like they were very rich. Their clothing and their hair and the way they were acting and everything, it made them look like they were very rich.
Who's they?
Noah and his family.
Okay.
They're all richly dressed and all this. And that's not what I perceive to be the way God's people had at that time, that they weren't normally royalty type people.
Yeah,
Do we know?
No, but it's my,
But it's your-
my
it's-
white spaces.
It's how you fill in the white space. Okay, good. Jess?
I hope I look that good when I'm 500.
Yeah. There's definitely an age difference. Yeah, okay, that's a good. Yeah, what age is Noah?
I mean, Russell Crowe between 500 and 600, he didn't hardly change up.
Got a new haircut, but that's about it, right? Yep.
Don't take this wrong, you won't.
Anything else? That flood scene, I can't remember how many tens of thousands of gallons of water they used. 3 extras drowned.
I was going to ask that.
3 extras drowned. One of the extras that was in the film was John Wayne, very early in his career. The deaths on this film scene actually led to significant changes in practices on films for stunt people in Hollywood, and the implementation of new laws around filmmaking because
What about the animals?
of the deaths. There's another thing that's kind of fun in this that I think is kind of neat.
Build the ark.
Yeah, the question that they seem to address here is kind of an underlying question we don't ask a lot, but both films deal with, and that is, how in the world did Noah with his 3 sons build this massive ark, this massive boat?
With the elephants?
Well, and here he's got the elephants helping. If you saw in the movie trailer, the elephants are picking up stuff and moving it, okay? In Darren Aronofsky's film with Russell Crowe, he has a different answer. If you've seen Evan Almighty, another good Bible film, animals help him too. So it's a question. How is it that such a massive boat could get built with just 4 to 8 people?
And with such primitive equipment.
But does it talk about the time frame in which, because wasn't it like 10
It
years?
takes a long time. It takes a long time to build it. But even so, even with a long time to build it, massive beams and whatnot, the physicalness of lifting and whatnot becomes a question.
Well, not only that, but where did the wood come from?
Ah.
I mean, the area that I've seen over there, yeah, I know, the area that I've seen over there is not the most
So-
wooded place I've
Okay,
ever been.
so let me ask another question. Where does the Noah story take place?
Oh,
We know where the boat ends up.
Right.
but we have no clue where he starts. The text doesn't say. Doesn't say at all. So we assume. Well, it must have been in this land or that land or whatever, but we don't have an answer.
These giants can get a lot of work done.
So then you got the little text where it says, there were giants on the earth. Maybe the giants helped. Okay. So we've talked about, what is some of the white space it's filling in here? It's helping see that when you see these things like, it wasn't like that. Well, how do you know? Okay. Is it because it's deviating from the text, or is it because it's filling in white space? And what might we learn from that? Okay. So let's look at Noah. Darren Aronofsky, we'll talk about him as we go through this a little bit. Russell Crowe, Hermione Granger. It's got. If your kids are like mine, Percy Jackson is in it. It's got this big all-star cast. It's got a $125 million budget. It was a major Hollywood film. And when it was released, evangelical Christians lost their minds. Hated it. And in fact, in test screenings with Christian groups, Paramount Pictures, the company that was responsible for its production and distribution, was required to add a disclaimer to the marketing materials that says, the film is inspired by the story of Noah. While artistic license has been taken, we believe this film is true to the essence, values, and integrity of a story that is a cornerstone of faith for millions of people worldwide. The biblical story of Noah can be found in the book of Genesis. On the surface, I think that's harmless. I would argue that what it misses is the fact that even in reading the biblical story, you have to fill in white space.
I'm sorry. That is more curating than the movie itself.
Aha! Why? How so? How so?
The true essence, values, integrity of the story. It's absolutely like saying Noah was a creep, right? and God calls creepiness righteous. I mean, the movie itself was whatever, right? It didn't bother me at all. But to say it's true to the values, that's stupid.
Hold on to that thought on righteousness. Okay, hold on to that. So, you've watched the film. Is there some white space that it chose to interpret that jumped out at you?
The moving rocks was a little weird.
Okay, the Watchers. Okay.
They were Transformers, weren't they?
They kind of look like Transformers.
Transformers.
Okay, they kind of look like Transformers. Where does Aronofsky get this idea of Watchers as fallen angels helping or influencing the world? I'll tell you, he didn't make it up.
Doesn't it go back to where angels were walking the earth at that time with giants?
It's number one, it's an interpretation of the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and in those days the Nephilim were on the earth. It's from that, but it's also from the book of Jubilees and the book of First Enoch, which blame fallen angels for the propagation of evil and violence on the earth.
So it wasn't humans' fault.
It was no, in their view, not. It wasn't humans' fault. It was. They're not to say humans weren't partly to blame, but that the violence and the propagation of evil they blamed on fallen angels. Okay. Now I see the skeptical looks, right? We've looked at some of the scriptures, some of the passages a few weeks ago from First Enoch. Satan does not show up in the Old Testament except in Job, and in Job it's not a name. It's a title. It's the accuser. So the idea of fallen angels is prevalent throughout the Second Temple period when the Gospels are written. Prevalent. They read that into this story. Did I see a hand go up? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, in Genesis 6, where it's talking about the Nephilim, and right after that, it talks about how God saw how great the wickedness had become. I mean, there seems to be a tie-in, but there's also a phrase that I'm curious what you think. It says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards.
Mm.
What is that? What do you think that
Yeah.
is?
So I can tell you how in Jubilees and First Enoch they deal with it. They deal with it in that the flood bodily destroys the watchers, but that their spirits remain, which leads to the ideas of demons and unclean spirits that want to inhabit people. That's how they deal with it. It's a problematic text. We don't know exactly what it means, and so we see Jewish writers from before the New Testament is written, even before some books of the Old Testament are written, that are engaging with these stories and asking those same questions and coming up with answers. Okay. Yes, sir.
Just those of you that weren't in the class that Anthony and I did before, if you're interested in this topic, we spent weeks talking about, and it's a series on Jude. So if you go online and go back to the videos, there is a whole series where we talked about this in detail. So just if you're curious.
Yeah. And strange. And Jude quotes verbatim out of First Enoch. Verbatim. What other white space do you see? There's some fascinating little details.
Well, when they were telling the story of creation, and they showed Adam and Eve as creatures of light.
Ah. Okay.
Clothed in light.
Sons of light versus sons of darkness. Yep.
Yeah, and maybe from when Moses went up on the mountain. And, was there with God for a while and came back glowing.
Yeah, so there's biblical tradition that when Moses would go up on the mountain, he would come down and he would be radiant from the presence of God. And I believe, I can't remember which book of the New Testament it is, that it says that he would cover himself, and it wasn't because of the radiance, but that the radiance was fading after he came down. Again, that's using other tradition that it's interpreting, but it's indicative in this story of, that's a very good observation, that Adam and Eve walk with God. They're in the presence of God, and they are glowing. Really, really nice.
2 Corinthians 3.
2 Corinthians 3. Thank you. What else?
Well, how Noah hears from God in the film.
Say that again. Tell more about that.
Well, it's like a weird dream sequences, portions of it. Like he gets this idea that this is from God through dreams.
Okay, so we're gonna watch. My screen gets so small here. I'm sorry. Pull out when I wear my contacts, I can see distance great, but my up close vision is awful. So we're going to look at Noah's two dreams. And I'm going to argue that what he does here has biblical precedent. We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Methuselah.
Did he speak to you?
I think so.
Will he help us?
He's going to destroy the world.
All right.
Long and
That's
dangerous,
one.
but always.
And then dream 2.
Before you walked on, my father Enoch told me one day, if man continued in his ways, the Creator would annihilate this world.
So what I saw was true. All life blotted out because of what man has done. Can it not be averted?
Noah, you must trust that he speaks in a way that you can understand. So you tell me, can this destruction be averted?
No.
No.
He sent me here. Why send me if there's nothing I can do to stop it?
Well, perhaps he simply sent you here to share a cup of tea with an old man.
So, is that all you saw? The fires of destruction in this place?
No. Not fire. Water.
Water? Huh. My father said it would be fire.
I saw water. Death by water. I saw death. And I saw new life. There's something more, Grandpa. Something I have to do. I know it. I just didn't see what it was.
New life. Well, perhaps there is more for you to see. Did he not send you here to drink a cup of tea with an old man? Medicine always tastes bad.
Mother helped him. I held her hand.
Must have made her feel safe. Well, fire consumes all. Water cleanses. It separates the foul from the pure, the wicked from the innocent, and that which sinks from that which rises.
It destroys all. Only to start again. You sure? Yes. The storm cannot be stopped, but it can be survived.
Okay. What about these dreams? Why does he have dreams like this?
It's very plausible. That's an ongoing form of communication throughout the scriptures. That's, God used that so many times. I mean, as far as white space, that's a very powerful.
So this is from Numbers. And if you recall, Moses, it's kind of another weird passage. Moses gets a Cushite wife. And Miriam and Aaron are somehow ticked about it. And they decide, well, hold on a minute. This isn't right. God speaks to us too. We need to do something about it. And God calls Miriam and Moses and Aaron to the tent of meeting for a little family intervention. And he says this. He says, when there are prophets among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. Not so with my servant Moses. He is entrusted with all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly, not in riddles. And he beholds the form of the Lord. So what Aronofsky does is he decides to make Noah's dreams. He decides to have instead of giving the biblical text, thou shalt make the ark and these many cubits and this many cubits, he decides to put it in a dream. And he decides to make it a riddle based on this text. Okay? The blood. Did you notice that? When he lifts up his foot and there's blood on it. One of the traditions says that the reason for the flood, and if you'll notice that passage that we talk about the Nephilim, in that beginning section of the Noah story, it talks about how violence had spread throughout the land, and that all men's thoughts were on evil, and violence shows up, I think, several times in that passage. And the idea is that sacrifice could cover a lot of things. But one of the things sacrifice did not cover was murder, because murder polluted the land. And how do you get rid of the land being impure? Water. So the reason for the flood is the purification of the land, in addition to wiping out the evil that's causing the impurity in the land. Okay, that's causing the murder, that's causing the violence. But the film also raises an interesting question. How does it define righteousness? Yes, sir.
One other note to add to that. When Cain had
Thank you,
Abel,
yes.
God said, your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground, and now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand.
Yes.
So, I mean, exactly what you were describing.
Yeah. It starts. Thank you for mentioning that. It starts with Cain. His blood cries out from the ground, and when Noah lifts up his foot, and if there's blood on it, the ground is literally saturated with blood crying out from the ground, and God is doing something about it. But what I find really interesting is, how does it define righteousness? What is it that makes Noah righteous? Because let's be honest, Noah is not a likable guy in this film.
He's willing to do what he believes God is telling him to do.
Okay.
He's the last of the line of Seth, though. He's from the line of Seth.
Okay. And what is their mission? What is it that labels them as righteous? It's taking care of creation. It is, and this is a difference in how we view the passage in Genesis that talks about, rule over creation and subdue it. is more the language of a king talking about taking care of his subjects than it is drill baby drill. Okay? It is what today we would call an ecological reading of it, and there's heavy ecological reading within this story. It's just as the first Noah movie we looked at interpreted the Noah story in the context of World War I, Aronofsky interprets it in the context of industrialization and global warming. But he's playing off of the promise and the command given to Adam and Eve, or to the man and the woman in Genesis 1, to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, meaning care for it. And for Aronofsky, that's how he decides to define righteousness, because Noah's kind of a jerk in the film. And incidentally, in Jewish tradition, Noah is not well thought of either. He's not well thought of because they don't believe he preaches the coming destruction. He doesn't stand in the gap.
But Peter said he did. Said he preached for 120 years.
Yes, but where does Peter get that?
Jewish tradition, I guess.
Okay, he doesn't get it from Genesis, right? It's because it's not there.
But that was not on his shoulders. God had already determined what he was going to do.
Yeah. The two prophets that are not well thought of within Jewish tradition are Noah and Jonah.
And the other thing I would add to that, Rob, is it said that God's heart was troubled. I mean, this was not.
Yes.
And I think Noah saw that. And when they depict in that first film, the husband or Noah and his wife, presumably, are all this grief and emotion. Maybe they felt that way, but maybe they knew that God had already determined, hey, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah. What
I
impact?
thought it was interesting that Noah had decided that all mankind would be wiped out, including him, the righteous few. That would be, and that was the thing that kind of bothered me, is that
Evil is in all of us.
He believed that God saved him and his family, so that they would eventually, they also would die. Why save them if they are going to disappear also?
Hold on to that thought for a minute, because it relates to this, but it also relates to another point I want us to think about that we don't often think about. In this film, what impact does the flood have on Noah and his understanding of what he thinks God's will is? He kind of goes crazy.
Yeah.
But it begs a question. Yes, sir.
Noah thinks that God wants to start over with no humans.
With no humans.
Just
yes. Now I want to twist that a little bit, because that's clearly Aronofsky is that's his interpretive license in the story. But it begs a question with a scene in the film or a scene in the Bible that we don't often know what to do with. And the question is, what would it do to a person who has this massive boat that either could not or would not save any other people, any other humans besides his immediate family?
Twilight Zone. Remember the Twilight Zone episode?
No.
About the bombing? They built a bomb shelter and then they only let so many neighbors in.
Oh, okay.
Same thing.
Okay.
They have the moral dilemma. They can save people, but he wants he just built it for his family, or So, I mean, to me, it would be like heartbroken, heart-wrenching, because here's all your friends too, and your other extended family that you're not gonna be on the boat.
Yeah. You notice Methuselah didn't have a spot on the boat. In my mind, and again, I'm fully admitting I'm reading into the white space, but I connect that with one of the last scenes we see of Noah. Snot-slinging drunk and naked in his tent. What would it do to a man that couldn't or wouldn't? I think the text connects to the fact that it's hard on him. His ending is not very happy in the biblical story. Okay? And I think we miss that just reading the text. And I think a film, especially what I think Aronofsky does beautifully here is, although I don't agree with how he necessarily all connects it together, he does get to the point of saying, there's no doubt Noah's got some survivor's remorse. Okay? And what does it do? It affects him deeply to where he's calming it with alcohol. Okay?
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
So the most touching moment of the whole film for me was because the film depicted whether he's going to take a lot of license, but it depicts Noah's believing loyalty. And
Yes.
Noah, and whatever, and what he envisions that he is seeing, these dreams that are coming to him, he is stuck on that believing loyalty, and he will do it to the end. And he says over and over, "I will fulfill and complete the mission."
Yeah, even when he doesn't want to.
But the turning point of the movie for me was when he gets on top of the boat and goes up to the girl holding the two babies with a knife in his hand,
Yeah.
and is about to do what he is fully convinced that Yahweh has told him. He is convinced in his mind Yahweh has told him to do. But all of a sudden, and there's this rage in his face. You know, talking about the camera having him. There's this rage in his body and everything about it. But then all of a sudden, it all breaks because love wins.
Yeah.
You know, there is this something inside of him takes over, and it shows the other side that God has shown him something, but He's also given him the ability to make a choice.
Yeah.
And he does.
Yeah. I want to end with this question. Does the flood fix anything? I can't look at Israel and Gaza right now and say,
Probably short term.
did it fix it short term? Did it cleanse the land? Yes. I have a hard time thinking it solved anything.
But God knew that.
You know, and we get the promise we tell our kids, and I'm not trying to be irreverent by saying this at all, but I will no longer destroy the, see, I have laid my bow down in the sky, which is what it literally says. But I will no longer destroy the earth with water. Asterisk, fire maybe, not water, right? Okay, you know what I mean? It's a...
And if that doesn't work, he's going to try something else.
Yeah, but this is a question. And are we supposed to ask this story, or ask this question?
But I think that,
Yes, sir.
I'll go back to that thing with Peter, but it says in that text, not in this hypothesis we're talking about now.
Sure.
It says in the text, God waited patiently for them to change. So in that sense, we get the full understanding of what God did then, because He allowed them that time to repent if they would, just like He's doing right now. He's waiting patiently for us, for the world to come around to His way of seeing it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I would only say I would hate for us to read that and say that's the only answer. What I see in that is I see Peter in the early. I'm going to put Peter in a Jewish perspective because Christians were Jews at that point. I see him wrestling with the text the same way we should wrestle with it. And he comes up with an answer, right? God waited patiently then, just like He's doing now. Just like He was doing for Peter's time, and just like He continues to do. Yes, ma'am.
It's also a really good lesson for me to learn, like, when I talk with someone in my generation, like, I hate the world. Everybody just needs to die, right? Basically.
Yep.
And God just kind of says, like, if I was back then, if I experienced that, you would think I would love to say that I learned enough about evil to not want to partake in it.
Yeah.
And I've learned, God did this amazing, crazy thing. You think people would learn their lesson, right? But
yeah.
I guess it just shows we cannot, God can do everything else and show us everything step by step. This is what I'm willing to do to save you, or this is if you could only just understand this. But it takes Jesus. It's the only way.
Yeah.
So,
And
I
it's
think
kind
God
of
was just
think God was just deciding, my personal being is, he's trying one more time to not have to send his son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't look at the flood without looking at God leading a nation for the world, and then you can't look at the flood and see what God did for Jesus Christ. There's three things God's shaping the world. It's almost like raising a kid. You start with discipline. You start with the worst discipline a lot of times when they're a small child, so they won't hurt themselves. And then when they get a little bit older, when Christian gets a little bit older, then you start, all right, world, I'm going to show you what it would look like if I grabbed a nation and led them by the hand. I'll show you what the real God is. And then, now that y'all are mature enough, world, now I'm going to send you my son. You know? And it's almost like what God's having to do to raise his kid, get him ready for the coming of the Messiah.
Yep. Yep. We could talk for hours on this, but I hope what you'll do is I hope you look at it and say, well, even if he does some things that are creative with the film, what can I do with this film that helps me to see things in the text that I might not otherwise see? And what can I learn from that? I tell people all the time, anymore in my program, 90% of what I read I disagree with. But I always learn something. And I think that's one of those ways that film can really help us. So for next week, I'd like you to read Genesis 1 through 3. Then read the flood story again. We're going to try to look at some differences. How are Noah and Adam similar? How are they different? How is Noah possibly a second Adam? We might look at, are there two different flood traditions that get merged together here in the text? I think there are. I think there's good reason for that. And then we're going to do a little bit of wrap up as to, okay, looking at this story from 5 different angles, what have we learned? What have we learned about the text that maybe we didn't know before? And how does that help us know God better? How does it help us know how to be God's people better? I know we've gone a little bit long this morning. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your participation and your patience. And we'll dive in more next week.